Who says that all main characters are heroic? Yet we know our heroes to often be paragons of justice, often winning through the power of positive feelings, friendships and determination. But that's not very fun, is it? Not realistic to boot. What if we can have main characters that instead follow human nature and channel the power of evil? Well, it's not as dramatic as that, but there are quite a few anime out there where our main characters, protagonists or otherwise, aren't exactly shining examples of people who have the moral high ground. Still, it gives them a required edge to keep the story going in the not-so-typical direction. Plus, evil is cool, isn't it, right? Okay, I've talked enough. It's time to go through the top 10 anime with villainous main characters. Starting things off, we have Black Lagoon. Living a monotonous life, Rokuro must have been waiting for some divine intervention to help spice up his daily trudge through the boring everyday. Well, divine intervention did come, just not in the form that anyone would have prayed for. I mean, who'd pray to have their lives changed in the form of capture by a mercenary group calling themselves Black Lagoon? Circumstances then force him to cooperate with this squad that makes its living by less than virtuous means. It's truly survival of the fittest as Rokuro finds himself needing to adjust to this hellhole he finds himself in. Black Lagoon is a high-octane thriller that seeks to dive into themes like morals and virtue. It's an exciting look at Rokuro's character as his worldview begins to transform thanks to his less-than-moral crew. I mean, surrounded with a cast full of jerks, psychotic and outright evil characters, who wouldn't do so? If you've seen clips of Revi, who's one of the main characters, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Survival of the fittest is the name of the game in such a crapsack world after all. In 8th place is Gankutsuo. I don't know about you, but I just love it when classic literature and anime intersect. And what better piece of classic literature to adapt into anime than one of the most lasting and memorable tales of revenge, The Count of Monte Cristo. Now take such a beloved tale and add some sci-fi elements into it and you get Gankutsuo. The main character being immoral is pretty much a given if you're familiar with the source material. I mean, it's a tale of cold-blooded revenge for crying out loud. On the other hand, I'd like to bring your attention to Gankutsuo's art style. I don't think that I ever saw anything like this before picking this show up. It surely divided the anime community a bit when they first saw it, but whatever your reactions to that are, please don't let it hamper your enjoyment when watching this creative and innovative retelling of one of the most beloved literary classics out there. Ever heard of that grandpa who gets caught in an explosion and comes out of it a hero? Well, here it is. Inuyashiki feels the full wrath of an explosion and comes out of it reformed as a cyborg. While he decides to use his powers for good, he also catches wind of another person who's gone through what he has, the villainous Shishigami. Now, I'd say that Inuyashiki is an interesting case for this list, because honestly, in most regards, our old man protagonist is heroic. Unlike most of the immoral protagonist or protagonist allies that get featured in the shows I've been talking about, Inuyashiki himself is generally a good guy. What I want to focus on here is Shishigami. Shishigami's the villain, but he's the main character, and a lot of the story is told from his perspective. This opens up some angles to which the story can be told, and I really like how it was done in Inuyashiki. It gives you a certain perspective that you don't expect from what seemed to be a superhero show. Inuyashiki is not a long anime, so I think that you can give it a shot if you're in for some no-holds-barred action featuring discussions on two characters seated on very opposite ends of the moral spectrum. All hail the almighty Ainz in our number 6 show, Overlord. Have you heard of the exploits of the amazing Ainz-sama? Once a powerful wizard and a master of his own guild in the VR game Yggdrasil, Momonga decides to enjoy his last hours in the online world just as it crumbles. Only it doesn't, and he gets stuck in the body of his skeleton lich avatar. Left in a world after the end, he now finds himself the master of a completely different world, one where non-player characters seem to have awakened to personalities of their own. Now christened the overlord of this new world, Momonga, eventually Ainz-Gon begins his conquest. At his beck and call are loyal servants of the Tomb of Monsters that will help him find the answers to this predicament that he finds himself in. Overpowered protagonist anime done right, Overlord sure has garnered its fair share of polarizing opinions from its execution, its world, and its characters. But being someone who enjoyed Irregular at Magic High School and the currently airing Misfit of Demon King Academy, I just can't help but be a sucker for overpowered protagonists that give no damn about morals. I do think a nice aspect to Overlord is just seeing how the humanity in shine slowly erodes as he continues his journey. I do also think that the other characters deserve more shine, but reveling at the awesomeness of the protagonist kept me in the ride. With that, you more or less have an idea of what to expect in Overlord, so go ahead and see for yourself if it's to your liking. Remember that anime starring terrorist protagonists? Well, it's here at number 5. Terror in Resonance. Terror in Resonance finds Tokyo in the midst of a chain of terrorist attacks by our protagonist duo. Dubbing themselves Sphinx, they continue the attacks, leaving behind riddles as their way of looking for challenging opponents. The efforts do pay off, attracting a particular individual, Kenjiro Shibazaki. Now, the battle is on between the terrorists and the genius set to end the duo's reign of terror. The themes of Terror in Resonance might be a little bit unsettling for others, but I think that having such extremists as protagonists opens up a rarely explored angle in anime. Terror in Resonance is rich in themes that deal with politics, morals, and the like. It's also rife with tragedy and mysteries surrounding the main duo and how we reach this particular point. If you're up for a show that helps reshape your understanding of the world, Terror in Resonance is here. Fourth on the list is Yujosenki, localized as Saga of Tanya the Evil. Doesn't the pretty ominous title already sound you off? Well, you're in for a hell of a ride. What happens when a remorseless HR manager gets isekai'd and dropped into the heartless midst of a war-torn land? Well, take her immoral skills and vicious streak in the real world and translate it into war, of course. Such is the story of Tanya, our protagonist in Yujosenki. Tanya's every bit cold-hearted, immoral, calculating, and utterly ruthless. It doesn't mean that the show can't be a fun ride, especially seeing all the crazy shit she pulls. Turns out that the merciless world of warfare is just the perfect place for a HR manager to run wild. This crazy setup comes back with some of the best background art and soundtrack from recent anime that I can recall, and I can see why the show became such a big hit. If you enjoy anime with a unique plot, are a sucker for wartime settings and strategic plots, or simply want to root for intelligent and calculating main characters, Yujosenki could be the show just for you. 91 Days brings us to the Prohibition era, quite the stark contrast to the pseudo-World War world of Yujosenki. Here we get acquainted with Angelo Lagusa, who has his own quest for revenge against the Vanities. I think it's a no-brainer as to why the title makes it onto this list. You gotta toss aside some morals to pursue such a quest after all. The opening scene alone establishes what kind of protagonist we have, and I think that makes him all the more of an interesting character to follow. Personally, I think that 91 Days is a show that was mostly carried by how charismatic the main character is and how interesting the writing of him is. The show itself is more of a slow-paced show that builds up excellently to its climactic act. The slow burn style might not be for everyone, but those who follow through will find themselves audience to one of the best revenge dramas that anime can offer. It's got suspense, it's got a lot of intrigue, and it has some of the most engaging characters found in the genre. I was really torn with who to give the first place spot to, but narrowly missing out the top spot by an inch is Code Geass. Where can we get started with Code Geass? Give the most magnificent, megalomaniacal genius in the world with the power to control minds and witness the fireworks of political upheaval. Oh, and throw in some cool robots there and some of the greatest art and animation the late 2000s has seen, and you've got what could be the 2000s anime of the decade. Chessmaster just doesn't do enough justice to describe the cerebral abilities of the characters in this show, and it was such a joy watching the battle of wits week after week with the rest of the anime community back then. Lelouch also isn't bound by a lot of the morals that hold back a lot of anime heroes, so we can see the depths and full capacity of the human mind through him. It's really telling to see how much of an impact Code Geass has made. Decades after its cathartic conclusion, you still see a huge fan base and a lot of additional material. Heck, you still see a lot of collabs with random mobile games out there. I do think that the only thing it lacked is a little bit more mainstream penetration that the #1 placer on this list had, at least locally. I'd argue that in terms of actual show quality though, Code Geass might as well be the #1 show on our list. So, any guesses as to what comes next? On the top of the list is a suspiciously similar show, both in terms of scope, popularity, and the sheer magnificence of its protagonist. It's Death Note. who hasn't heard of Death Note? I think it's even more of the quintessential villain protagonist show, even more than Code Geass, as I think Lelouch is overall just a more sympathetic character than Light Yagami. For those who don't know, Death Note's basically what happens when you give an arrogant hero with a god complex the complete power to enact justice. Using the titular Death Note, Light begins his crusade to rid the world of crime by wiping out criminals one at a time with his handy power. As we all know, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and we eventually get to some of the best games of cat and mouse between him and Super Detective L. I think it's a no-brainer that Death Note gets to the top of our list. Seriously, what other series on this list had as much of a lasting impact as Death Note? I think only Code Geass, which missed out on the top spot by a hair's length, can compare. But given how much of a good social commentary on justice and morality Death Note was and still is, its legacy doesn't surprise me one bit. So how's that for a lineup of shows with immoral main characters? Do these shows prove or disprove the point that edgy is cool? Tell me your opinions on the mentioned shows that you've watched, and I'm sure that we'll have a good time talking about your not so typical main characters. As of now, I'll take my leave. With 10 shows that will help you ponder on your worldviews and morals, that's plenty of time to keep you busy until the next video.